Hello, welcome back to Shak's Talks. I'm Shakti, and today we're finishing up our little talk about Astral Experiences, this book by Jason Quitt. And I really enjoyed this book for a number of reasons. Firstly, I think it was written in a way that was just so easy to absorb, and I read a lot of these different books about spirituality and consciousness and people's individual experiences and their theories. I thought he did a really nice job balancing his own stories and experiences with a light amount of research and like references to other texts, and it was just the right amount because we all have busy lives and there's so much to dig into, and the deeper in you go, the less in-depth explanation is required in certain instances. So it's like there are these books out there that exist and they serve the purpose of being like that academic text with all of the references and so much information and like so many words and so many pages. And this was just really concise, very personal, very to the point. And I talked about it in the last episode a little bit. And I just wanted to share a couple things that stood out, a couple more things, and then talk about what I found out at the very end of this book. So I've told this story before on Shak's Talks, I'm pretty sure. And I just want to reiterate that like I am a student and I'm always learning, and I don't claim to be an expert, but I have had quite a few experiences, and they range in nature from telepathic to precognitive to the night terror type experiences, what some people might consider like, I'm just going to say seeing things, hearing things, smelling things, feeling things, knowing things, and strange dreams, meditation experiences. I just now got up from a 30-minute meditation. I decided to do my practice before recording. And what I'm working with right now is the space between waking and sleeping and trying to allow myself to relax and drift off enough to where I'm not in the fully waking state, but also maintaining my consciousness and trying to remember what happens in that place. And it's a tricky place to play around in because it's easy to get sucked into sleep or to be too awake. So like getting into that in-between zone is very challenging, but fun to play around with. And some of the experiences that I've had have occurred in that space, and they've happened spontaneously or not when I was expecting it. But I wanted to show you this picture from his book because this hooded, robed, dark shadow being is such a classic figure that so many of us have seen. And it started for me when I was a kid. One of them was climbing up over my bed, and it was during a sleepover when two other people were sleeping on either side of me. And the creature, it was like a demon in my mind, and it kind of crawled all the way up and over me, and I started screaming and kicking and trying to get it off of me, and the other people that I was with woke up and were trying to calm me down, and all three of us were awake, and I could still see it. So it wasn't like a dream where I was asleep. I was probably in that in-between state when I started to perceive it, and then I woke all the way up, but I could still see it. Similarly, I've had the experience of laying down to go down for a nap, and my eyes were still open, and I saw this light being outside of the window that was like this kind of sparkling peach humanoid shaped blob of a being, but it freaked me out. It completely scared me because I was awake and I saw it, and it wasn't supposed to be there. It was like a house where there was like a little alleyway behind it of just plants growing and a tall fence, so there was no way for people to walk back there. It was all fenced in. And I ended up jumping up out of my bed and running across the house and stubbing my toe on the way and falling in the kitchen, and I was a shaking mess at the end of it. So just showing you the kind of physical response that I had. My body doesn't know the difference. My mind didn't know the difference between real or not real, this dimension or another dimension, I still have that response, that fear response. And this also happened with a dark shadow being in my room at night one night when I had met a neighbor in my new neighborhood, and they told me a story about the house I live in and how there was an exorcism here when they were a kid. And it was an interesting conversation because we had this kind of psychic conversation where like me and this new neighbor were being like, yeah, I see stuff, I hear stuff. You know, we were kind of connecting in that way. Like it happens with people who have these things going on. You can kind of sense each other, spot each other. And sometimes those spontaneous conversations just happen and you just go very deep, very fast. This is very typical in my experience. And so I don't know if like a seed of fear was planted or just me being aware of that opened me up to having an experience that night. But I felt perfectly fine when I went to bed. And then I was awakened in the night by this shadow being that looked exactly like that picture that I showed. This black hooded, dark, no face, just pure shadow hovering right over my bed, standing right next to my bed and just looking at me, not moving, not doing anything. But I panicked so hard because everything in me just perceived it as completely real. A human is in my room. I'm about to die. This is the end of my life. It's too late to do anything because they're already here. It's this tall, giant being. And I just flailed. I scrambled. I jumped. I leapt out of bed. I banged myself against the wall. I was like a huge mess, you know, and then it was gone, you know. So it's like, I guess the fear tests that we all have to go through to be able to progress towards having more of these experiences are really real and they're really difficult to pass, is kind of what I'm saying here. And a lot of what Jason Quitt was talking about reminded me of that. You know, you go through just so many different experiences where you have to contend with things that you're not used to. And it can be really, really hard, and it's a really serious thing, you know. Like I had a phase in my life where I was hearing a lot of auditory voices, and I was going to psychiatrists. I was trying different medications. I was, you know, in and out of a lot of different special programs trying to help me deal with that. And eventually, I think through a combination of working with, you know, different therapies and using the medication as a chance to kind of move through the really toughest part of it. And then I ended up working with basically a shamanic healer. And after I had that session, the voices were gone. And that was a whole different experience where it just, it showed me that it was a spiritual condition that I was dealing with. Now, I want to make it very clear that I am not making any recommendations for anyone to do anything that I did. I want to make it very clear that there are real mental health conditions and chemical conditions and biological situations that do require medicine and special therapies, and there's nothing wrong with any of that. Everyone should do exactly what they need to do to be healthy and living the best life possible. And there's nothing wrong with any of the forms of medicines, you know, including Western medicine that gets a bad rap. You know, sometimes you gotta whip it out. It's like all the different tools, you know, whatever's necessary. So not giving any advice here, not giving any medical advice, but I am sharing my own personal experience because I just want to illustrate how severe these things can feel and how confusing they can be, and how I benefited from learning about these types of experiences that other people have, because it helped me to navigate my own and to move through it. And I've been free from that experience for a long time now. For 15 or more years, I haven't had like the persistent voices, and I haven't personally been on any kinds of medications this whole time. That was a very short period in my life, and it was something I had to do because I was in a severe state, and it was very unexpected. But there's a lot more to that story. And I think what happened is, in my perception, in my opinion about myself, I had become permeable to these things during a phase in my life when I was neglecting myself. I was dealing with a lot of depression, a lot of pain emotionally, and I was, using other illegal substances for a time that like contributed to the thinning of the veil, honestly. And that's something else that Jason Quitt talks about in his book. He talks about his different experiences with, plant medicines ranging from just cannabis all the way to ayahuasca. And it's becoming more and more clear to me through all of my research that not only plant medicines, but also synthetic substances do have impacts on our apparatus that change our experiences in consciousness, and for better or for worse. And I think they all come with their prices to pay, you could say. And to each their own. I definitely am not here to judge, because in a way, some of the worst decisions I ever made in my life led to the most profound growth and change. So again, not making any recommendations here for anyone, but I am sharing openly and honestly because I do think it's important. So then let's talk about these interdimensionals. So the coolest part of this book for me was learning about this memorandum of importance. And this is in the chapter called Etheric Worlds and UFOs. And this happened the same day that the Roswell Daily Record published its front page article about the recovery of a flying disc before all the cover-up stuff started. A memorandum of importance was sent to the FBI claiming to know the true origins of the UFO phenomenon. The author was Meade Lane, and that is Layne, an American academic and occultist who founded the Borderland Science Research Associates, BSRA, in San Diego in 1945. So this organization was exploring fringe phenomena, and that included parapsychology, psychic abilities, and the occult. And in this memorandum, Meade Lane talks about the situation and his or their, or I don't know this person or their gender, but Meade Lane's perspective on basically what aliens are, or what these things are all about. So I just want to go over some of the points that were made here. There was a point about part of the discs carrying crews and others being under remote control. Now, this is back in 1945, and this is very, very relevant today with all the talk of people being able to use their consciousness to pilot the craft. And they state that the mission is peaceful and the visitors are contemplating settling on this plane. So not on this planet, but on this plane. And then they get into like what that's all about. They talk about the visitors being human-like, but much larger in size, coming from their own world, not from any planet as we know it, but from an etheric planet which interpenetrates with our own and is not perceptible to us. And then talking about the bodies and the craft themselves being able to materialize on entering the vibratory rate of our dense matter. So being able to come into physical matter reality and materialize. And then talking about rays that the discs possess, like these weapons basically, and also making the distinction that this is a region that is not the astral plane, but it corresponds to the lokas or the talas. And students of esoteric matters will understand these terms, is what they said in this memorandum. And then this is a very interesting last little tidbit too. They probably cannot be reached by radio, but probably can be by radar. So if a signal system can be devised for that apparatus. So the things that stand out here most to me, because I'm often thinking like, these are either just astral beings or they are physical aliens from physical planets with astral bodies, just like we are physical beings on a physical planet with astral bodies. But this is introducing a third possibility, which is this etheric plane that interpenetrates our own, which is fascinating in and of itself. And that these beings may, they don't talk about it here, but they may have an astral body that we can connect to, but they can also, they live in another plane of existence that can interpenetrate ours and they can materialize into ours. So this is very specific and nuanced, and I find it fascinating. I think it makes a lot of sense, actually. And this idea that like radio couldn't work to reach them, but radar could, is really relevant to the Skywatcher work and this dog whistle and these psionic signals that are being sent that are summoning UAP. This idea of these things being able to materialize into our reality could explain some of the anomalous behavior, like the trans medium capabilities. And I just think it's very interesting that this was all going on in the 40s, and this person had a very clear idea of what these things were. So getting back into some of my own stories and also referring to some of the things that Jason talks about here, you have these, let's think about this idea of these other planes of existence that are kind of hidden from us, but existing right here with us. He gets into like all of these old stories and myths and folklore, a lot like similar to the Jacques Vallée work, but also specifically like some of the Buddhist and other ancient religious notions of these other domains, like Shambhala, for example. And I'm trying to look up this, something about the Shambhala. But anyway, I remember in one of my experiences during the time in my life when I was having the most anomalous experiences all at once, which a lot of that I think had to do with sleep deprivation, was thinning the veil for me more than any other factor in my life. And sometimes I would walk around downtown LA and I would see, as if an AR overlay, these incredibly gorgeous, tall buildings, like almost like the Emerald City or something from like J.R.R. Tolkien or something, like these, but they were like modern at the same time. It had this sort of futuristic and past fantastical quality. Everything, I could see it like it was realer than real, but it was overlaid. I could see the actual reality too. And this would happen during the day with my eyes wide open. And I could see these like sparkling, towering structures. And it was almost like this whole other city was revealing itself to me. And I had other experiences like that with people. Like I would be riding on the bus and I would see people kind of flickering in and out of existence, almost like as if we were in the Matrix. I saw a whole scene play out in front of me one day where I was standing in a parking garage looking down at the sidewalk, and I saw this like flat, almost like a flat scrim was there with like projection on it, but it wasn't there in real life. And I saw like a woman and a child, and there was some kind of scene playing out, like the mom was like trying to get the kid to go somewhere or something. So anyway, again, I'm just sharing these things because I always thought they were so weird that I never really wanted to talk about them. And the more I learn about other people's experiences, the more validated I feel. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I've had that, so that happens to a lot of us. So I'm hoping that me being open helps you to feel less weird about the weird stuff that you've probably seen or gone through. And it's not that important that we understand it necessarily. I think the main takeaway is that these things, they spark our interest and they get us on a path of learning. And that's a good thing. And hopefully that path of learning leads us to a more purposeful and meaningful life in this physical reality, in this place where we're focused, just dealing with what's in front of us. But I do think that it's possible that I think I'm pretty psychic, to be honest, and I've had a lot of experiences throughout my life. And I think that during my really troubled times, I was having a lot of anomalous experiences, but I think a lot of them were really kind of psychic premonitions of things that I was going to learn about now in my life, like in the future back then. And I was just getting flashes of information, and it was being rendered for me in all kinds of different ways, you know? So I think it's pretty easy for me to understand at this point now that we are all basically just floating in this world of information and data, and our physical bodies and our consciousness systems are filtering that data, and that's our perception and that's our experience. But different people have different experiences, and different factors influence the way we experience the data that is reality, this reality and the greater realities. One of the people whose work I'm starting to get into a little bit more, his name is Darius J Wright. And he gave a talk on YouTube that I was listening to earlier today, where he talks about the nature of reality as he's seen it in his astral travels. And again, I think we should all be cautioned to not grab onto anyone else's ideas of what reality is too intensely, but take it all with a grain of salt. And again, it is pointing to this possible, you know, more of a virtual kind of reality, this multidimensional. There's many different sort of bubbles of these different realms and worlds, and people who are going out of body are able to experience them. And one of the things they talk about, a lot of people talk about with the out of body experience, is this sensation of realness, like it is physical. It's different from this physical. It's another kind of physical, but you're experiencing so much when you're in that state. It can sometimes feel more real, brighter, like high definition kind of version of this reality. And that's very fascinating too. So I think that's all I'll say for today. I really enjoyed this book. I have a couple other books that I'm in the middle of reading right now, so I'm just doing little short updates while I get through all of these things. But I am feeling very drawn to working with my own energy and my practices now, and just trying to get back into gaining more control over those liminal states that we can get into through meditation. I'm using the Expand app from the Monroe Institute with a lot of pre-recorded guided meditations. I'm using Tom Campbell's binaural beats, which you can buy off of his website, mybigtoe.org. And I'm sometimes just using the sounds of nature, or just like no sound at all. And also noticing what happens in my dreams more, and especially in this little chunk of time where I wake up early, fall back asleep for like 30 minutes to an hour, and the dreams that are happening there are very interesting, and they have a different quality than the dreams that happen in the deeper sleep. So those are the things I'm tracking, and I'd love to hear what you're doing in the comments. Thanks again for being here, and I'll see you next time on Shocks Talks.